Right, so I can already see Peter has his hand up. Peter Harbour.
Well, my question is quite simple. I enjoyed the talk, but and learned and understood quite a lot. But one thing I didn't relate to was if you're already using solar PV for electricity, then and you're using it for heating hot water, i.e., you're using the heat when it's there from the sun to heat your hot water. How does the interaction of that go with the solar thermal, with the heat pump electricity?
Well, actually, that was a I didn't go into it, but it was a complication of our system because we had one of these things called an immersun, which switches the excess PV to an immersion heater in the hot water tank. And we've had that for a number of years, even with the gas boiler. So I didn't say anything about it because in some sense, nothing has changed. We still have it with the heat pump, but it did have the consequence that when our heat pump system, the suppliers like to use things called integrated cylinders, which are basically, you have your hot water tank and it has all the pumps, valves and everything else all as an integrated unit they can just plop in and plumb in. Well, because we had this system, it wouldn't have allowed us to separately control the immersion heater. Now with a heat pump, you do need an immersion heater in your hot water tank. And the reason for this is that due to the requirements to do with Legionella, you have to heat your hot water to 65 at least once every 2 weeks in order to ensure you're not getting Legionella building up in the system. So that is why they have the immersion heater, because otherwise the normal 55 is perfectly satisfactory for most purposes.
Okay, what about the solar grants and the grant from this scheme for the hot water? Do they interact with each other in any way, or are they just what it says on the tin?
They don't interact with each other in any way. No.
Okay, that's simple then. Thank you.
Right, John Stores, have you got your hand up?
That's really interesting, Guy. Thanks very much. My question is not about air source or ground source. It's about groundwater source. So we live in Cullen, close to the Thames, and it seems to me that there must be an enormous amount of efficiently tappable energy in the water. So have you looked into that, Guy, at all?
Well, no, I haven't looked into it myself, but I do know somebody who did look into it, and it proved rather complicated and expensive. Now, one of the reasons it was complicated was because you would think you might be allowed or get a permit to extract the water, put it through a heat exchanger and then pump it back into the river again. But apparently, you know, the water authority don't want you to do that. You have to put heat exchanging mats into the river or something like this. And things like, complications like that make it quite expensive. And of course, not many people do those sort of systems. So it all tends to be a bit niche and expensive. And also, I would question whether it's really necessary, because as I've said, when you think that the average water temperature it's still going to be, you know, 8-10 degrees or something like that over the winter. It's not going to be hugely different from the ground. And given that ground source heat pumps don't in reality perform very much better than air source heat pumps, then what is the point? You might as well, you know, have a much simpler system based on an air source heat pump, and probably be a lot cheaper.
Thanks. I'll think very carefully about this.
But you know, you should. I'm not an expert on this. You would have to research it yourself and speak to people that are. I mean, one thing worth mentioning is that one thing that the representative of Alto Energy said to me was that, of course, you should be a bit more skeptical of companies that only do one type of system. In other words, if they only sell ground source heat pumps, they will tell you that they are better. And of course, theoretically, they are. Alto Energy sell both, and they say, well, they aren't. You know, they're similar performance, and that the main reason people choose ground source is because of the structure of the RHI grant system at the moment.
Okay, thank you, John. Andreas had his hand up next.
My question regarding this seasonal performance factor, do I understand this correctly? This is an average over the whole year. And therefore, I think the comparison between ground source, and I'm thinking not about the ground source with the coils in the ground, but a vertical one where you have a constant temperature. I think you can compare only this over winter, over 3, 4, 5 months, because I think the my question is the air source heat pump, the SPF factor so high because in summer you have a very high efficiency, but you don't need it because you want to heat in winter?
If you're asking, yeah, I mean, clearly air source heat pumps will be better than ground source heat pumps in the warmer months when the ground is colder than the air. There's always going to be a time of year when you know, the air is warmer than the ground. And that's why, because the ground heats up over the summer. So sort of by definition, it is colder than the air on average. So it is certainly the case that air source heat pumps will start to win over ground source heat pumps over the summer. But of course, most of your energy, most of your heat use isn't in the summer. That's a relatively low overall percentage. And it's, you know, it's all these complications that mean that the actual performance can be rather similar. But perhaps I should say that you know, you shouldn't take my numbers as being general, will apply to anybody, any system, because these numbers that are quoted by Alto Energy for me are specific for my house with that combination of underfloor heating and radiators, because their model, it's based on a model that assumes we need a certain amount of water at, you know, temperature A and a bit more at temperature B. So they try and work out for my particular situation what this efficiency will be. If your radiators, for example, needed to run at a bit of a higher temperature than mine, well, then your performance factor would be a bit lower. Or if you're all underfloor heating, the heat pump could deliver cooler water, and the efficiency factor that they would estimate would probably be higher. So these numbers aren't totally independent of your house and what heating radiators and things, so forth.
Right, hang on. We've got John Mears and we've got Adrian. So we'll do John first. I think he had his hand up first.
Simple question. So there's a big fan in the unit. I'm wondering how much of the time is that fan running and how much noise does it make?
Oh, well, that's a very good question, because I was a bit concerned about that it might end up sounding like a jet engine or something. We were well, the heat pump that was recommended to us is a Mitsubishi EcoDan, which prides itself on being extremely quiet. It's claimed to be 40 decibels at 2 meters, I think, which they say is similar to a noise level in a library. I'm not sure whether that's quite true, because you don't get that sort of whooshing noise in a library, but it is certainly pretty quiet. And my neighbor said it's quieter than our gas boiler. But I will say that how noisy it is depends on what the outside temperature is. At the moment, when it's relatively mild, it is very quiet because the fan only spins as fast as it needs to be. It doesn't go flat out all the time. But if you go out when it's -1 outside, it is starting to whoosh a bit, but then you're not going to be sat out there, you know, having a picnic. At least most of us won't be. So I don't find the noise intrusive, and you might not want to put it right next to your neighbour's back door, but I think it's pretty acceptable.
Okay, thank you.
Right, thank you very much. And next it's Adrian.
That was a really interesting talk, thank you. You mentioned a book. I was wondering if there are any books on I can follow up to do a bit more studying on this.
Well, I mean, if you're interested in the sort of underlying physics of it all, then Sustainable Energy Without the Hot Air by David McKay, which is free to download, has got, well, here's here it is. You can get a paper copy, which I think is much easier to read, but it's also free. It's got something on heat pumps in it as well. So if you're interested in the sort of underlying aspects of it. And actually, the interesting thing about it is that, you know, he goes into boreholes and as well the large vertical systems that are drilled, and points out that there is a disadvantage with those, because if the thermal conductivity of the ground's not very good, and you can actually deplete the ground of heat if you extract it from too closely packed boreholes. So we would have a problem if everybody had these boreholes. But anyway, that's unlikely for other reasons, but he looks at questions like that.
Right. So in summary, your experience is the capital costs are by and large neutral. The running costs are more, but the benefit being a reduction in carbon emission.
Yes, I think it is clear that with current electricity pricing, your heating costs will be higher, all other things being equal. Yeah. I don't think you will get quite the benefit that you're told you will, because of this issue of the fact that unless you're somebody who runs your gas system constantly and keeps the house at a fairly constant temperature, I don't think you will get exactly the performance they say, but it's still pretty good. But it certainly won't save you money unless you're running on a more expensive fuel like LPG or oil.
Great. Oh, thank you very much. Really good.
The Abingdon outdoor swimming pool is heated using oil. They said it wasn't economic even to lay gas pipes from the what's the name of the place next door, to the pool. Would you use air force heating to heat a swimming pool like that?
Oh, I'm not the one to ask. Clearly, you could use air source heat pumps to do that, but it depends how much total heat you need. And I would think that you have to consider the electricity supply that's available. So I would think a major cost could also be if the electricity supply to that location will take the amount of power that you need. But yeah, I mean, it sounds an expensive option, heating an outdoor pool with electricity. I'm not sure how green that is. I don't know whether you'd qualify for I doubt whether it's within the scope of the RHI scheme, to put it that way.
It stops people travelling away to go to the seaside.
I think you would have to totally finance it oneself, which sounds expensive.
No, but there's councils who would be doing this. That's the thing. And they
I thought you were going to suggest we extract heat out of it.
Now, don't you dare.
Right, okay, we're ready for another question. Now, I did say Richard Clark.
Shall I go ahead? Yes.
Yeah.
Hello, Guy. Very interesting and very timely, because as a trustee of St Ethelwold's House, we're looking into how do we replace our 2 gas boilers. That's 60 kilowatts in total. And one of the things we're looking at is a heat pump. And we pretty much came to the conclusion, for obvious reasons, that digging up the garden was a no-go. So the question is river or air source heat pump. Now, it turns out that there's one example in the UK at Surbiton, and Ed Davey, MP, happens to be an expert on it, in a complex which has 41 30 kilowatt heating systems, heat pump systems, and they went through all the labyrinth of finding out how it was done. It was achieved, it's been successful, it's a very complex system, also Mitsubishi, I believe. But your comments about the seasonal performance do make me think, so I'm encouraged to hear your comments on sound. We'd have to find a way of disguising the Mitsubishi units, but it's certainly something worth considering of. There was a comment I had though, which is, I think you said for your system, which is 11 kilowatts or thereabouts, you were saving 3 tons of CO2 per year. Now, if I did a back of an envelope calculation and generously assumed your system would last 25 years, that's something over £100 of a ton of carbon saved. Is that really good government policy?
Sorry.
It sounds like it's going to be, for the government, about £100 or more per ton of carbon saved.
Well, how else do you propose doing it?
It's quite a scheme in terms of cost. And yes, I mean, I would have dared to speak of hydrogen, but recognize that that is indeed trying to keep an older industry going. So it's all going to come out in the balance in the next few years.
Well, I mean, hydrogen derived from fossil fuels could only be a sort of transition to something else.
I agree.
So it might buy you time. At some point, you'll still have to invest in heat pumps because they will make the best use of a renewable electricity source at the end of the day. So I think at some point you do have to make the investment.
Right, bullet, yes.
I mean, the problem is polluting is much cheaper than not polluting, and that is true for many things that we do, and that makes it very hard. We seem to be relying on moral imperative rather than market forces to fix the problem, and that's only going to go a little way.
So to bring our particular case down to earth with a bump, I mean, we're a medieval Georgian building that's extremely leaky in terms of air ingress and things like that. Does the RHI consider those factors, or would we?
I can't comment on that. I really don't know what measures they would have expected you to have taken before. Yes, I mean, I guess you'd have to have your EPC. Do you have an EPC for your building? And if so, did it come up with recommendations you haven't complied with? I mean, the main ones for insulation and all of that. That's the.
We've done a little bit of work on that, but I expect it's not very good.
Yeah, well, I think you know, I'm just a, you know, in the end of the day, I'm a homeowner who's done this. I'm not an expert. I think if you really want to know these things, you shouldn't rely on what I say. You should research them yourself through experts who know what they're doing.
Thank you very much.
The next question is from Harriet Mogridge.
Hello.
Harriet.
It's me actually asking the question, Harriet's husband.
Okay.
Is it important to have a short pipe run from the pump to the tank?
Well, I don't know the answer to that question, but I do know that the engineer who came to commission our heat pump, he said he was installing one in his house, and that he'd decided he didn't like the look of it, and he was going to put it 50 meters, or was it 50 feet down his garden. And so he bought, 50 feet of insulated, special insulated pipe, which could be sort of buried. And so he could have the heat pump well removed from the house. So that suggests to me that proximity, if you have well insulated pipe, is not going to be a problem. It might increase the loss, bit of energy loss associated with the pumping, but that's probably not a lot. So you would have to get an expert opinion again if you want a really sensible answer, but I don't think you especially need a short run. It seems people install heat pumps in all sorts of different houses. I don't think there's a major issue.
All right, thank you. And the next person in line is Tony Richmond.
Yeah, my question is, do I understand correctly that you can't apply the heat pump to your underfloor heating?
Yeah, and no, that's incorrect. I mean, underfloor heating is the preferred system for heat pumps because it's a large area heat source. So the water temperature that it needs to operate is lower, and that means heat pumps can operate more efficiently. So the ideal house, and if you were building a modern low energy consumption dwelling, you probably build it with underfloor heating built in and so forth, and that would be the best way to do it. Most houses, older houses, if you had, like us, a bit of improvement, you might have a bit of underfloor heating, but I think a lot of people might just have radiators. So yes, it can cope with a mix, and you can supply the water at whatever temperature is appropriate. Of course, the higher the temperature that's required, the slightly lower the efficiency will be.
My heating is all hot air.
Well, if you have hot air heating, one of the interesting points about the RHI scheme is that air-to-air heat pumps, which are effectively air conditioners run in reverse, are not funded by the RHI scheme. I think this is because there's an anxiety. Effectively, they are air conditioners, And I think the government is worried that if you give somebody an air conditioner as a heating system, they'll end up using it as an air conditioner in the summer, which will undo all the good that you did by having it as a heat pump in the winter. So that's why I think they're not in the scheme.
Thank you.
Okay, brilliant. Next person on the list is Robert Longstaff.
Hi, just a couple of observations more on the questions that came up after. I was involved in a project on a trust property, which was trying to extract heat from the lake. It was really interesting. We delved into all the comparisons quite a lot. It's really cheap because you leave all the pipe coiled up on a pallet and then you sink the pallet. So the installation is really, really cheap. But the temperatures involved are less, as you pointed out. That means the drop off is quite quick. So you have about 200 meters maximum before the system effectively goes in reverse. That also goes back to a question you just asked about length of pipe. Yes, the insulated pipe works really well, but it's about £200 a meter to buy. So it is really, really expensive. So closer is always going to be better on that. The only other one was I sat in on a discussion at the National House Building Centre about air source and ground source. The thing that came up at the end of that is the way our winters and springs are changing. Once you have depleted the ground of its heat, it basically doesn't heat up again for months and months and months, as you alluded. So from that point of view, air source seems to be on average now better than the ground source.
Yes, and of course you would expect the trend with global warming to actually, you know, unfortunately, not that we want it, it should help air source get even further ahead.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you. Andres, did you have your hand up again?
Yes, I had my hand up again, just a very simple one. Does it make a difference if the air source heat pump is installed on the south side or the north-facing side of the house?
Well, I asked this question because ours is on the north-facing side, so I mean, I don't think the heat pump company or the person I asked said no, but I don't think they know. I mean, I think there might be a very small difference, but I mean, if you think that air can flow pretty freely between the front and the back, I guess there might be times in the spring when, you know, it's sunny, when it's shady at the back, when perhaps the air temperature might be different by a degree or two. But given that you're always heating, you're heating tens of degrees always, like 30 degrees. I mean, you're never going to have more than a degree or two difference probably in the air temperature between the front and the back of the house. So it's probably a minor effect. It's much more important to put it somewhere where the plumbing is relatively straightforward, and you know, it's all the practical considerations that will determine where you put it, less than where's optimal from an air temperature perspective.
Okay, I'll just look at the screens. I can't see any more hands up on the first screen. Oh, hang on, I can see Robert Rutherford. What would you like to ask?
Thanks, Guy. Makes the air colder. How much colder does it make it, and how close have you got it to your back door?
It's right next to my back door, actually, and when you walk past it, it does give you a bit of a cold blast. I mean, it's not going to turn you into a snowman or anything like that. Yeah, well, it's what you'd expect. It's like an air conditioner that's operating outside, making cold a bit colder. I don't know what to say. I haven't measured it. But
it sounds like a few degrees.
But well, clearly, it wouldn't be doing its job properly if it was more than a degree or two, because it doesn't want to. It wants to draw heat from the warmest possible air. If it just keeps chilling the air inside it, its efficiency will drop off. So yeah, it is actually deliberately designed to have a large throughput of air, so the temperature drops relatively small. It probably in part just feels cold because of the wind, because it's blowing a lot of air out the front.
Okay, any more hands up? Oh, Andreas.
You showed this graph where your the depending on the outside temperature and your energy saving, and you could measure only to -1 degree, and you said this is pretty linear. But I think, and I think I've seen some graphs, but online, that there is a limit for heat source, air source heat pumps. Where's then your drop off of your system?
Oh, I'm trying to remember what the number was. I would, to be honest, I'd have to go away and look it up, but it's pretty low for when it stops working altogether. I can't tell you, I'm afraid. It's a lot less than -1 anyway. Yeah, I know the antifreeze in it was supposed to be good to -7, but yeah, I'm not sure is the answer. In my head is -17, but I'm not absolutely sure about that. I think I could be wrong.
Maybe it's somewhere in the specs of your...
Oh, it would be. I mean, if you
okay.
go to look up Mitsubishi Ikogan, it will tell you in the technical sheet what the minimum temperature is. I mean, clearly that would be annoying if you, but it's unlikely the way things are going that we'll have many days like that.
Okay, we've got time for a couple more questions before 9 o'clock. So Eric's got his hand up, and then Kath Somerville has as well. So Eric, do you want to unmute yourself?
I did. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, just to say that I actually saw air source heat pumps on the north coast of Norway, and they told me that they will go down to -25. So certainly down, it will never be that level.
Yeah. So maybe the -17 I've remembered right. It's pretty low anyway.
Yeah.
Possibly. I can confirm -25 according to the Mitsubishi website.
Okay. Of course, it has to be said, if it were -25, you would be pretty cold in your house, because 11 kilowatts would not be enough to keep your house warm, and the performance factor would be, obviously pretty low, but it would be just a blip, hopefully, and you would get through it.
I think Norwegian buildings are built a little bit differently.
Well, I'm saying in this country, if you did experience it, yeah.
If we had that temperature in the region, we probably have other problems.
Yes.
Okay then, right, to finish up, I'd like to ask the last question then, Guy. You've done a lot of eco-friendly projects on your house. Have you considered rainwater harvesting?
No. Well, I've thought about it, but I haven't looked into it. So if somebody wants to give a talk about that, I'd be interested. I mean, I have water butts and the usual, but nothing that actually, one does think about, it would be interesting to have a grey water system, as it were, to replace the obvious grey water uses in the house. But yeah, I mean, it sounds expensive and complicated, but I can't comment because I haven't done anything on that.
Yes, because my brother-in-law has told me to look into it, because we've got solar panels, and he said you'd get a much better return on any investment if you had a rainwater harvesting tank, and he's actually installed some in other people's houses and reckons that they've got a good return on their investment, as well as not having to have water pumped from the local water authority. So might be worth looking into.
I really can't comment on that. I mean, I do have experience with my PV system, which I actually had a slide on. And I don't know whether there's a similar issue with water, and that is, I mean, the problem with PV systems is, of course, you do produce an impressive amount of electricity each year, but it's very hard to use it because it's available when you least need it. It's most available when you least need it, by and large, because you'd like to have it in dark evenings or in the winter mostly, and you get it in nice sunny days when you don't want to be indoors running electrical appliances. So, I mean, I guess with rainwater harvesting, you know, you have to think about, you know, when it dries out, when it's not rained for a long time, and that's sort of what is you can end up with too much when you're not using so much, and then not enough when you do want it. So you know, I suppose you have to think about the bigger picture.
Okay, right, well, thank you very much, Guy. It's been a very interesting and informative evening, and thanks for your answers to all the questions. And thank you to everybody here for coming and asking great questions and being a great audience again. And we'll let you know details of our next talk in a month's time. So thanks a lot. Bye, everybody.